detail. L2. Woo.
Attention all companies. Attention all companies. Today, we lower our flags to half-staff and pause for a moment of silence to honor the memory of the fallen firefighters and first responders who made the ultimate sacrifice responding to the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001. We recall their courage, compassion, and dedication to duty as they willingly advanced toward danger rather than retreat. We also honor the memory of our fallen brother and sister firefighters, police officers, emergency medical personnel, and servicemen and women who have given their lives before and since that day protecting others. Today, we recognize you and we thank you. Your legacy and the standard you established is our greatest inheritance. We will never forget.
Again, I would like to welcome you on behalf of Chief O'Neill, all the LFD members, and welcome you to the Division of Fire Headquarters. I would also like to welcome Deputy Mayor James, distinguished guests, and of course, all active duty and retired firefighters. I thank you for joining us on this solemn anniversary of our annual September 11th memorial ceremony. Today, we mourn the tragic events of 9/11 and pay tribute to those who made the ultimate sacrifice while protecting others. Deputy Mayor James is a native of Louisville who is dedicated to community service, public safety, and public service. He's a retired LMPD police officer and detective, the former president of Metro Council, and is now serving as the deputy mayor of the city of Louisville. Deputy Mayor James.
Good morning. First, I'd like to send an apology for Mayor Greenberg, who had a death in his family over the weekend, and now he's out of town attending a funeral. And I'd like to also thank Chief O'Neill and everyone with Louisville Fire and Rescue for putting this tribute together, because it's important that we remember that day together as a community and as a country. Of course, on the personal level, those of us who lived through that day will always remember it. We'll remember the shock, the grief, the anger, and more that we felt even as a distance as we watched this attack turn into a disaster that killed nearly 3,000 people. And of course, all of us, at one time or another, have imagined what it must have been like inside those towers 22 years ago on that morning. And I expect that's especially true for firefighters. I imagine that any firefighter of any age, when you hear the stories of 9/11, you imagine what your fellow firefighters went through on that day. What they did, what they felt. What would you do if you were faced with something similar? But I can say with absolute confidence that I know what you would do. You are a part of one of the best fire and rescue teams in America here in Louisville, Louisville Fire and Rescue. You would do the right thing. You would put your training into action. You would save lives. That's what you do here. That's what you do now in moments of crisis that have never reached the scale of 9/11, thankfully, but have involved serious and immediate threats to lives of others, lives you have prioritized above your own. Just like the firefighters and others, first responders, that did 22 years ago in Manhattan. See, what we need to remember about 9/11 and make sure that the future generations know about 9/11 is much more than the attack. It's the response. It's the bravery of the men and women from the FDNY, who rushed into the burning World Trade Center to get people out. It's the sacrifice of the 343 firefighters who died in or as a result of those attacks. It's the commitment of firefighters, police officers, and first responders everywhere to keeping people safe. That's part of the strength, the beauty, and resilience of America. That's what you train and prepare for each and every day, and what you put into practice every time that alarm sounds. I'm proud of you, proud to serve our city alongside you, and proud to share this moment where we honor those we lost on 9/11 and the courage that made them heroes. Let's continue to honor their sacrifice with our own commitment to the people we all serve. Thank you. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor James. Chief Brian O'Neill has served with the Louisville Fire Department for 22 years. He was recently sworn in as the 21st Chief of the Louisville Division of Fire on August 1st, 2023. He has also served 8 years in the United States Marine Corps. Chief O'Neill.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Special thanks to Deputy Mayor James, always a great colleague and supporter and co-worker. So, when we look back on the tragedy of September 11th, I think about all that was lost, all the people that were lost, and the generations that were lost because of it. I think of people like Wanda Green, a flight attendant on United 93, Toshio Kuge, a Japanese student who was also on that flight, who wanted to learn English and wanted to go to school in America. He was just 20 years old. Timothy Maud, who went to work in the Pentagon and was killed almost instantly upon the impact of that flight. Rick Rescorla, who got up that day just to go to work at Morgan Stanley, left behind a wife and 2 children. Stephen Siller, a firefighter who was off duty, that then responded because he heard about the tragedy. He was a father of 5. I think also of the resulting change in America. This didn't just happen to us, and we want to make sure that we're not trying to own part of this grief. This happened in New York, it happened in Pennsylvania, it happened in DC, it wasn't here in Kentucky, but it did happen to the brotherhood and sisterhood of police and fire, and it happened to America, and it changed us going forward. I think of the resulting wars. Many of our members are veterans of those wars. I was already out by then, and I lost friends that I'd served with that went on and were killed in that war. People like Tyler Swisher, Captain, United States Marine Corps. Master Sergeant Arian Torian, who is from Paducah, Kentucky. And Louisville's own Sergeant David Wimberg. When I think about the loss and the attack, it makes me angry. I hate the people that did such a terrible thing to our country, to our psyche, to our culture. But then I remember the words of Dr. Martin Luther King. He said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. And hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that." And I look back and I want to focus on the love of that day. When you get home, take some time to Google the Silver Star citation of Sergeant David Wimberg. Sergeant David Wimberg, who did not have to go to war, who sat at the dinner table right here in Louisville with his mother and father and said, "Mom, Dad, I have to go. I know I can get out right now if I want, but those young Marines, they need my time, they need my experience." And he gave just that. He didn't order his Marines through the door, he kicked through the door himself. And after being mortally wounded, continued to direct and protect his Marines. When I think of United 93, when they heard the word of what was going on and they knew what their fate was, they made a decision that our lives are already forfeit, so let's make sure that no more are lost. And they took back that plane. When I think of Rick Rescorla, veteran of the British Army and the United States Army, veteran of Vietnam, who ran countless drills with Morgan Stanley to make sure that his employees would be able to get out, because he knew after the bombing in the 90s that something might happen again. Over 3,000 employees of Morgan Stanley were there that day, and they only lost 6, because when they were ordered to hold in place, he said, no, we're getting out. And he got those people out, but then he went back in to make sure that others could be found. And he died that day. When I think of Lieutenant General Maud in the Pentagon, although killed instantly, the pride that he must have felt, that he could have felt if he had known how his coworkers and soldiers behaved that way, leading people to safety and tending to the wounded. When I think of Stephen Siller, who heard, he was off duty, and he heard on the scanner what was going on, so he went and he got his gear, he drove down from Brooklyn. Everything was shut down, so he put his gear on and he ran over 2 miles through the Brooklyn to Battery Tunnel so that he could join up with crews and get there into the Twin Towers to help. So yes, we lost 343 firefighters that day, 61 law enforcement officers, nearly 3,000 people that day. But because of the efforts of people like Rick, like Stephen, over 15,000 people were rescued that day. Over 15,000 people were saved from those towers because they got them out. That was the largest rescue incident in the history of the fire service. And that's what I choose to focus on. When you look at those numbers, that's not just a glass half full, glass half empty. That is a glass that is overflowing with life and love. Because of their lives that they were given and because of their loves for their fellow men and women, thousands were saved. So remember that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief O'Neill. And thank you all once again for joining us today as we pay tribute to one of the largest tragedies in American history, but as Chief O'Neill said, also one of the largest rescues and sacrifices in U.S. history. That's going to conclude our ceremony. Captain Shelton, you can dismiss your detail.
Detail, L10, dismiss.